got plenty of people pouring in.
As long as there's
Hello,
one.
everyone joining us. Thank you all for coming in. My name's Erica, and I'll be your host tonight. Thank you for joining us for our event with Ari Banias and Victoria Chang. Just before we get started, I want to let you know about a few upcoming events. Tune in next Tuesday on the 19th to see Alec Ross discuss his book, The Raging 2020s, Companies, Countries, People, and the Fight for Our Future with Andrea Corellis. And on Thursday, the 21st, Tiffany Yannick discusses her new novel, Monster in the Middle, with Edwidge Danticat on Zoom. As a reminder to our audience members, feel free to leave any questions and comments you have for our authors in the chat or the Q&A box below. And at the end of the hour, we will get to your questions. Ari Banias is the author of A Symmetry and Anybody, a finalist for the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the Penn Center USA Literary Award. Ari holds a BA from Sarah Lawrence College and an MFA in poetry from Hunter College. He lives and teaches in the Bay Area. Victoria Chang, writer and editor, has earned a BA in Asian Studies from the University of Michigan, an MA in Asian Studies from Harvard University, an MBA from Stanford, and an MFA from the Warren Wilson MFA program for writers. Chang is the editor of the anthology Asian American Poetry, The Next Generation. In addition to editing, she writes children's books and teaches in Antioch University's MFA program. She lives in Southern California with her family, and tonight we are here to celebrate the launch of Dear Memory and A Symmetry. Enjoy the reading, everyone.
Hi, it's so great to be here. I can't see any of you, but I know you're out there, so thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Erica, for the introduction. I do want to get a couple of thank yous in before I start reading. Thanks to Green Apple and to Victoria for reading with me tonight. I'm so excited to celebrate her book, Dear Memory, and to celebrate A Symmetry today. We share a pub date, so just felt right to read together. I also want to just thank everyone at Norton who worked on this book. I want to thank my family, my loved ones, my friends, and my partner for all their support and love while I wrote this book and finished it, especially those friends who read it closely and gave me their feedback. Also, thank yous to my colleagues and my students, to my blurbers, and to Zoe Leonard for the incredible photograph on the cover of the book. You can see more of her work many places and in many museum collections. And she's just an incredible artist, so I feel really honored. I want to dedicate this reading to my father, Padeli. This is for you. I love you. And with that, I'm going to start at the beginning of the book, and I'll sort of read around. So, Oracle. I was wrong. It isn't suffering that's easy, pleasure that's difficult. How is it I've been living this way, holding my piss, a mirror scuffed by distant talk, secretly livid, worried what the dead would think? Someone greets with only the top half of her head, brown curly hair behind a computer monitor. Today, for 1 second, a woman is anyone who has a body and can't forget it. The tight loops of the office carpet start to unhook. Some men are women too. The way a mountain is land and a harbor is land and a parking lot. Refuse the difference between sameness and difference. The ocean is on fire, green flame on the neck of a god who is a pile of rocks, not apologizing for themselves. This poem opens the third section of the book. It's called Time Lapse. The beauty of my home is that it moves, is how the thinking goes. 70 years ago, my grandfather trades a gold bracelet for an egg. A salt particle from the volcanic boulders dissolves, reconstitutes into terraces, footpaths, little heaps of goat turd. This year, fascists ascend the mountains to recruit again from the villages. A lamb will accept even the hardest rind of bread. Do I sing this? 40 years ago, adults dressed me as a cowgirl with a lisp. After they call the cave holy, people throw empty water bottles in it. When the lights go out, the cowgirl and I, freed from legibility, stop trying to boil the sadness out of dandelion greens. One coral reef digests its closest neighbor, another coral reef. So this book is about many things. I'm not going to give you a synopsis because I'm terrible at that, and I just would rather you experience the book for yourself. But I will say that like many of the poems are kind of, you know, about an ambivalence toward my relationship with my ancestry. Both my parents are Greek, and kind of like my process of making my way through understanding kind of what that means, both for me personally, but also in the history of the world and as we're living at, and the ways that sort of that particular ancestry and ancestry in general can be twisted into exclusion or into nationalism or into other material forms of violence. So that's also threading through these poems. Contingency. When you look at a fence, do you see the fence? When the slats are cut in the shape of a spear or the shape of a new shoot in spring, can you tell the difference? Your mother puts you in that wet red and white dress and there are photos of it. Are you inside the fence? When she sees her cousin brought to the town square among the dead, stacked in the bed of a wagon, she said. When the frantic hummingbird darts in the field of tinsel and the grapevines shimmering, what is it you see? The surface of the water appears undisturbed when more video evidence is released, a little surveillance device on the seat mouthing off silently. A fraction of you still believe this could change the outcome, that the outcome can seem other than your life. A single night of back-to-back reality TV. You feel your atoms go by on the logging truck carrying the strapped down trunks of massive redwoods. Throttling north. You see a woman bowing over a trash can repeatedly and she looks like she prays to, oh, help her. Who made you think that? If no amount of moving through the world with love, when even armies think themselves beautiful, or so you are told. If all the daily errands drown it out, does it have a name? When border agents empty gallons onto the desert floor on camera while smiling, when weighing whether or not to repeat this, what do you consult? Watching red berries on a bush shake and a red robin shit and the red brake lights of a Prius on a turn. When a low plane combs the birds from their treetops, your thoughts scatter to their familiar positions, if numbed now by emphasis. Are you inside it? When fisher folk agree to saw their boats in half for a one-time payment, cash. Green opalescent feathers are green opalescent feathers. Artists who design border wall prototypes are artists who say they leave politics out of it. You trace the shape of those words in your mouth. Red tips of matches, red tips of drought-tolerant succulents. A garden hose coiled on a wooden post, continents away. You try to separate pain from its subject. You try to separate yourself from its cause, while a man in cowboy pants declares the greatness of George Bush. You stack electronic gems one atop the next. And of course, he's a donor. By remaining in the building, you become what the building contains. The joint in a polished oak bench, the exhausted cloth applying the polish. When by fucking so hard you try to make your body reappear, are you inside the fence? When you saw your neighbor keeping her head down and wondered if you should keep your head down. You heard your neighbor screaming in the street and knew you should also scream. We don't drive to the sea, but we talk about the sea. Rain laid into my grimy window pane at an angle, a cocky guy against a car waiting. To watch water magnify the screen's perfect squares, then extinguish, like lights in an office building after hours when cleaning crews come in and leave. From my desk, I study it, where I take my little peasant meal, poached egg, brown bread, white cheese, grapefruit juice, brief and dense. A peasant meal, though the bread was $7, the eggs too, and purchased while in the luxury of a bad mood. No peasants write poems, some asshole says, and that asshole is me. If one notion follows another, the sense I make will break itself against itself. Round white petals on the street, I think are shattered glass. I steer around while they flutter, then go still. A baby carrot in a bag of baby carrots, nuzzled and shaved down into this wet shape. Why? So it could be forgotten, so it wouldn't have to be itself. Who wants to read about flower petals? Who wants to read about all the theory you've read? This blessed juice is sour and real. Meander, meandros. This poem is named for a river in what is now Turkey, the Meander River, which meanders. And it's also the name of a design motif, also known as the Greek key or the Greek fret, which is named after the river. Meandros. A law against refugees passed by the children of refugees. Decorative Hellenic borders on deli coffee cups, on a silver ring I used to wear. It feels nationalist now. It was always nationalist. Actually, I would say dawn is fruity, not milky, not gold. What to do with the lie of ethnicity? At dinner, T says, Greece is an invention of the 19th century, set on a plinth. Was this green once? Unknown. The cicadas go on. And I'll just read one more. I was going to read the title poem, but I actually want to end on a different note. So you can go read that yourself if you want to. Playa Vista. We're back in California now. I even love the naps. Was thinking this as I walked through a marsh marked private property, bordered by a 6-lane road with blocks of new construction, sandy orange, peachish beige condos right in the path of the sunset. Later, I was thinking, I even like this long blonde strand of hair here beside the hotel pool, caught on a rivet, fixed to the plywood lounging platform painted black and faced in wood laminate so as to appear stylish. It's cheap. The wind blows a bit, then settles. The hair flails energetically, then almost vanishes. I count 3 separate hairs, each claimed by a different screw. A single cloud passes over the sun. From another vantage, the cloud would be elsewhere. Gnats and birdsong ecstatic in the reeds. The lit up LA Fitness sign reflected in the marsh water, white on liquid pink. A duck paddles across and the letters smear. Last finds, facile nest, faintless. It can be some other way and is. Thanks so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing Victoria and talking with her after this. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Ari. That was so beautiful. I love your poems, and it's such a beautiful book. And I'm just so happy to be here with you. We were joking earlier, why do we do this to ourselves? But it's so nice because we like to write and make things to celebrate a book with Ari. So I feel very happy to be here today. And thanks everyone for coming. Thank you to Green Apple Books and to Erica for hosting us. I'm actually just gonna read a couple poems from my book Obit, and then show some slides of some of the stuff that's in this book, Dear Memory. But I'll probably just show, just share my screen now, so in case you want to read along. Okay, move you all to the side. So I'm going to read, let's see, I may not read the ones that show up. I'll read this one. This is just a book of poems that came out in 2020, and they are in little obituary shapes, and they are little distillations of grief. My mother passed away in 2015 of pulmonary fibrosis. This one's called My Mother's Teeth. Died twice, once in 1965, all pulled out from gum disease, once again on August 3rd, 2015. The fake teeth sit in a box in the garage. When she died, I touched them, smelled them, thought I heard a whimper. I shoved the teeth into my mouth, but having two sets of teeth only made me hungrier. When my mother died, I saw myself in the mirror, her words around my mouth like powder from a donut. Her last words were in English. She asked for a Sprite. I wonder whether her last thought was in Chinese. I wonder what her last thought was. I used to think that a dead person's words die with them. Now I know that they scatter, looking for meaning to attach to, like a scent. My mother used to collect orange blossoms in a small, shallow bowl. I passed the tree each that it moved. And I'll just read one more from this book. And the only reason why I'm reading from this book is mostly for comfort reasons, since I've been reading from it for a while, but also I feel like Dear Memory is kind of like a bookend or something that's related to an offshoot or some of the book a little bit. This one is a little blurry. There. Grief as I knew it died many times. It died trying to reunite with other lesser deaths. Each morning, I lay out my children's clothing to cover their grief. The grief remains, but is changed by what it is covered with. A picture of oblivion is not the same. My grief is not the same as my pain. My mother was a mathematician, so I tried to calculate my grief. My father was an engineer, so I tried to build a box around my grief, along with a small wooden bed that grief could lie down on. The text kept interrupting my grief, forcing me to speak about nothing. If you cut out a rectangle of a perfectly blue sky, no clouds, no wind, no birds, frame it with a blue frame, place it face up on the floor of an empty museum with an open atrium to the sky, that is grief. So I'm gonna switch over to this book, yeah, this book is a bit, I was telling Ari, it feels like a bit of a, like if you were to look at someone's trash can for a year, that's kind of what this book is, because it was all over the place, and it just it's just so many parts of things that were happening, and I was thinking in my life, it's a process book. And so I'll start with an image. So I found I had to clean out a storage facility. I just found a ton of pictures and documents and various papers, because my mother was a bit of a hoarder. And then I just thought started looking at these pictures. And I had all these questions, and then I started writing letters, which I'll read one in a second, but then I started writing little poems, and then they ended up on these pictures like clip art, and then they didn't really look that good. And then I started messing around with little pieces of paper that I wrote the poems on and didn't glue on. I just sort of let them hang around unfastened. So I'll just read one. I hear the phone ringing, but I can't answer it. It is silence calling. And here's just a part of a letter that I will read the whole thing, but you'll just only see part of it. It's the first one in the book. Dear Mother, I have so many questions. What city were you born in? What was your American birthday? Your Chinese birthday? What did your mother do? What did your grandmother do? Who was your father, grandfather? It's too late now, but I would like to know. I would like to know why your mother followed Chiang Kai-shek, taking you and your 6 or 7 siblings across China to Taiwan. I would like to know what was said in the planning meeting, to know who was in that meeting, where that meeting took place. I would like to know the people who were left behind. I would like to know if there are other people who look like me. I would like to know if you took a train, if you walked, if you had pockets in your dress, if you wore pants, if your hand was in a fist, if you held a small stone, if you thought the trees were black or green at night, if it was cold enough to see your breath, to sting your fingers. I would like to know who you spoke to along the way, if you had some preserved salty plums, which we both love, in your pocket. I would like to know if you carried a bag, if you had a book in your bag, where you got your food for the trip. Why I never knew your mother, father, or your siblings. I would like to have known your father, to know what his voice sounded like, if it was brittle or pale, if it was blue or red, to know the sound he made when he swallowed food. I would like to know if your mother was afraid. During college, I spent several weeks with her in Taiwan. She bought me baozi, or buns, every morning, the bao that steamed in small plastic bags with no ties, and sweet doujiang, tofu milk, always too hot for me to drink. She sat there and watched me eat, complained to me about your brother's wife, complained of being sick and how no one would help her. Do you know how long it took me to figure out how to call an ambulance? And then when they came, she refused to go. I still remember how the 2 men stared at me as if I could move a country. Listen, it's the wind. That's the same wind from your countries. Sometimes, if I listen closely at night, I can hear you drop a small bag at the door. I hear the sound of the bough touching the ground and the wind trying to open the bag. But when I open the door, there's nothing there. Just the same wind, thousands of years old. Happy birthday, wind. Happy birthday, mother. April 6, 1940. I know this now. All the nurses, doctors, and morticians asked me, so I memorized it. Your American birthday, April 6, 1940. I said again and again, as if I had known this my whole life. And so silence was a big part of my upbringing, which is why I didn't feel like I knew much about my family, and I had all these questions. And my mother had left mainland China to go to Taiwan when she was really young. And I had only had the chance to interview her once when a cousin had actually found her and had written her a letter. And I thought, boy, it'd be nice to ask her all these questions. So I actually had recorded an interview, but it wasn't until much later, after I'd finished all these random letters to grandparents and my sister and all these other people, that I remembered I had this recording, and then I found it. And that's when I sort of added it in, like just a transcription of it, making these like little collages. I won't read it, but I'll just read another small poem with some slips of paper. Once you had to stand behind your grandmother who left a country, each of your feet lifted off the land onto the boat like nightingales. I imagine the night sky, you below deck, light coming from 2 moons, but only half of your face lit up. You stood still as the moons rearranged themselves. During the switch, language was lost at sea. When language belongs to no one, a door opens. And maybe I will read one more small poem here, and then I'll end with an obituary poem. My dad worked at Ford Motor Company for most of his career as an engineer. And one of the things I found were these like really funny letters that congratulated him multiple years for having perfect attendance. And it just got me thinking about, you know, what I was doing all this time that he had perfect attendance, and I was in college or shortly thereafter. And my father had a stroke a whole bunch of years ago, so I can't really ask him any questions anymore. So I wrote this poem, and the artist Monica Ong actually said, hey, you know, put a thumbprint in that card there that sort of looks like his thumb was there. And so I did, and this is the poem. Was this your first job? Look at the window behind you as if leaving a country was all perspective and light. I wonder what is in your hand. It's so thin and small. It must be my home. And I will read one more poem, and then Ari and I are gonna be in conversation, and I think we're gonna take some of your questions if you have them. So this is a penultimate poem in my book Obit, and it just references the Marjorie Stoneman shooting in Florida. America died on February 14th, 2018, and my dead mother doesn't know. Since her death, America has died a series of small deaths, each one less precise than the next. My tears are now shaped like hooks, but my heart is damp still. If it is lucky, it is in the middle of its beats. The unlucky dead children hold telegrams they must hand to a woman at a desk. The woman will collect their belongings in shadows. My dead mother asks each of these children if they know me, have seen me, how tall my children are now. They will tell her that they once lived in Florida, not California. She will see the child with a hole in his head. She will blow the dreams out of the hole like dust. I used to think death was a kind of anesthesia. Now I imagine long lines, my mother taking in all the children. I imagine her touching their hair, how she might tickle their knees to make them laugh. The dead hold the other half of our ticket. The dead are an image of wind. And when they comb their hair, our trees rustle. Thank you. Okay, now we're together.
That was so incredible, Victoria. Wow.
Thank you.
I'm still metabolizing that line, when language belongs to no one, a door opens. Like that's, yeah.
Thank you. Well, we're going to ask each other questions. So start thinking of your questions, because we'll at some point we could never run out of questions. We were just talking on the phone and we had all sorts of questions for each other. But if you have questions for us, you can start putting them in the chat anytime. But I would love to ask you a question about your gorgeous cover. I just telling Ari, this is my favorite book cover of the year. I think it's so beautiful. And not even just the image, but just the design of the book, you know, and how the font, and then also how the title and your name is reversed. Can you tell us like how this cover was made, and then also your relationship with visual art?
Sure, I can try. I mean, I think, thank you for that question. And I mean, I do want to talk about the image. I think the book designer came up with the like reverse mirror text at the bottom, and I just like I loved it. I loved that the play between symmetry and asymmetry in this. Like I feel like it really got at something that I'm trying to do in the work, and kind of having it both ways, like having the thing and its opposite both be true. But in terms of the image on the cover, so I mentioned before, it's a photograph by the artist Zoe Leonard. It was taken in 1989. It's untitled. And ever since I first saw this photo, I don't actually remember when I first saw it, but it just totally gripped me. And I sort of forgot about it. And then I remembered it when I was thinking about the cover for this book. And I love that the frame of the airplane window is in the photo. And that there's just this, I find this photo kind of terrifying. and awe-inspiring. But I guess for me, there's so much in it in terms of like, you know, obviously travel, and kind of what does it mean to be mobile? What does it mean to travel? Travel as leisure, travel as choice, travel as migration, travel as displacement, like all of that is kind of churning there for me. And then also just the frame. And so the sort of thinking about the frames that are around our looking all the time. That's not even talking about visual art, but like I can come back to that. I mean, I have many artists in my life, and I feel like I learned so much from visual art, and not just visual art, but sort of all forms of art that are not language based. I feel like teach me so much about form and feeling. I feel like we could have a whole conversation about that.
Yeah, no, totally.
Maybe like, do you want to say something about your relationship? Because I feel like, you know, Dear Memory has obviously visual art in it and collage, but also, you know, like bureaucratic documents and legal documents. And I find it really fascinating and moving the way that like personal mementos and like a personal archive then kind of layers into a bureaucratic archive, and kind of the way those two things, like one is supposedly not intimate, and the like bureaucratic archive not supposed to be intimate, and then the like personal archive is supposed to be the ultimate, right? But like it's not that simple. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's funny. It's hard. It's so hard to talk about your own work. I'm a much better critic of other, like writing criticism of other people's work. And so I think this book was really hard to put together, and kind of to go to a little bit to Ekta's question I see in the chat of talking about what came first might be related to what you're talking about. And I mean, I feel like I started with the letters, and then started messing around. I never intended to write a book of letters even. And so when I started looking around at the images, I started sort of writing poems, and then, you know, including some stuff from my mother's letter that I found later. And then I realized that none of it fit together. And it didn't matter though. You know, I think I was just doing what anyone would do if they were in the basement of someone's of an old library, or in someone's attic, looking around. And I feel like that kind of randomness of the images that you find and the questions that I had you can feel that kind of searching and that process of searching. And so some of the images are sort of bureaucratic images, and others are things that I made because I felt like making them at the time. And I experimented with like watercolors. I mean, I tried everything, and I threw out so much, and finally ended up on these little slips of paper that felt like really, really raw and also rudimentary. You know, I'm not a visual artist, but I also was thinking, I'm not gonna not make these things because I'm not a visual artist. You know, it's like I kind of put myself in the head of like a 7-year-old. You know, it's like we're always telling kids to play and to experiment, to try things, and don't be afraid of if you're not good at something. And so I was very much so like, I don't care if I'm not an artist. I'm just gonna play with the things that I see. And so you know, choosing the images were just things that I that kind of intrigued me, and I started putting them aside. And then then writing poems, and then using slips of paper, but then all the while sort of working on the letters. So yeah, the process was really hard, and there were so many times when I wanted to throw the book, it wasn't a book, throw the whatever's into the trash and just toss the whole idea of whatever it was. The idea was, it wasn't anything. It didn't feel like it was working at all. And then Milkweed came calling at some point and was like, "Hey, you got to turn something in." And I was like, I even went back to look at my contract and to see if I could get out of it, because I was so distressed by this whole thing. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's not working, and this and that. And it was just a big mess. And because I hadn't put any forethought to it whatsoever. And so it very much so mimicked literally the process of one looking into a basement. And so that's what I had in the end. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Right. Did it start with that storage space? Like, was that the seed?
Yeah, just sort of like finding all this junk. I mean, people collect things, and a lot of things, and I never knew anything about my parents, or their backgrounds. They talked very little about it. And so once I started digging, though, I found all those, government documents and things like that. That's when I started having all these questions. But then again, there's no one to ask them to. So that became the basis of writing, is just the query. It became a lot of questions, a lot of repetition. I mean, I think the anaphora could drive people a little bit bonkers, but that's what it feels like in my own head, is like these endless, ruthless questions that can never be answered. So, and it's interesting because, like, to throw it back at you, and because I know we probably both hate talking about ourselves, but I noticed that in your book, you have landscape and country, and you're exploring some similar issues, or of identity, and like you were saying, sort of the ambivalence with ancestry. I love that phrase, because I think we all have ambivalence with ancestry. And then you have, so if you could talk more about that relationship with Greece, and also it's so. I have so many questions, but like an environment of Greece. So environmental, you bring up a lot of environmental, there's a lot of environmental language in there. There's like trash entering the ocean, chemical explosions, and there's war. And then there's like also sensuous love and romance, and all intermixed together in one poem that also explores your ancestry. So I'm interested in how, in many ways, our books are doing like that mashup. It's like it's all collides. And so could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Well, I'll start with, I don't know. Well, one thing I heard in your question, I love this question, was just thinking about like ambivalence about ancestry, and then also thinking about like place and the physicality of place. And I think that I hear the echoes of this in your work too, just sort of like thinking about, what is my relationship to like the place where my parents came from, and how do I make sense of that as somebody that, like, I'm not, Greek born. I was born in the US. Greek was like, I learned Greek and spoke Greek before I spoke English. So it was like, a mother tongue. But I'm not fluent, like my vocabulary sucks. Like I'm kind of like an 8-year-old or something. I'm probably not even an 8-year-old, but the language structure is there. And I guess I bring that up because, there's a lot of, obviously a lot to say about the politics of language and like authenticity. And like, so I think for me, and some of that shows up in the book, but I think for me, writing about and feeling through the senses, in terms of a relationship to land and landscape and like the physical, is a way of sort of, it doesn't circumvent that, right? But it sort of like, it cuts out, like I know that I'm here looking at this, plant, and like I might not know the Greek word for it, but like I know how to describe it in English, and I know how it makes me feel, or like I can start to think about it in that way. I can start to look at it materially. So it becomes like a starting place for me. And I think also too, like there's some poems that take place in France, and I spent some time in France, and I don't speak French, and so that was also like a this feeling of being like outside of the like common language, which I don't, I don't totally feel that in Greek, but I think that's a place where like that sort of, whether it's silence or reaching for that word, reaching for the door of a word that you don't have, that there's space for other things. And so I think, yeah, I don't know, like there's so much to say about landscape. I mean, I think also that like landscape holds like, there's like so much history in land that like is not languaged. And I think part of like how I write in relationship to like physical land, physical landscape, topography, architecture is like trying to sense my way to that, even if I don't know what it is. So, I mean, the mashup part would be another long answer, but yeah. I wanted to come, I mean, this sort of goes back to maybe something that we have in common in our books. There's this, that you write in Dear Memory about your father, and you write, the sicker father gets, the more American I become, which I like, that just like, that punched me in the gut when I read that line. Thinking about Americanness as something that's temporal and also related to like our living ancestors and like their relationship to like life and death or like illness. I'm wondering if you want to speak to that, whether, I mean, you don't have to talk about content, maybe you want to talk about that as like a formal idea, but is anything you want to say about that? That line, like spectacularly moving, yeah.
I think that's when my mother died, I began to realize that so much of my own history had died. And so, and I had felt so bad about not asking more questions, not that she would have necessarily answered them. I think she would have reluctantly answered them. But, I think that suddenly I realized that so much of my own identity was tied to them. And even though I didn't know a lot, it didn't seem to bother me that much when they were alive, because they represented my entire history in their bodies and beyond, obviously. But and then when their physical vessels sort of disappeared, I felt like a whole part, like I had basically died too. Was that, I know aren't immigrants children feel this way at all. I imagine they must, but I felt this huge loss and I felt suddenly unmoored in ways that I never expected, because this whole time I speak English. I was born here. I also grew up speaking Chinese first in our house, and that's all that, our Mandarin was all we spoke in our house. And so but still I felt like, oh, I'm American, I was born here. But then I realized, oh no, I'm so Chinese, but all of my Chineseness is in them, and so that's sort of kind of what I felt, I think, when I was writing that. And when my dad had a stroke, it was like, oh, that's gone. And then you don't realize that a loss of other people makes you feel like you lose so much of your own identity. And so that's sort of, I think, what I was probably thinking. But with writing, it's funny, we have no recollection of what we write, right? I don't remember anything. I don't did I write that? I don't remember that. But yeah. But maybe I'll ask you one more question that we can see if other people have questions in the audience. I just love your poems and how they kind of go up into the world and then they get really micro. And so I was telling you how I feel like you're a tweezer poet, like you have your little tweezers and you show us like a little strand of hair by the pool, but then you pan out and you can go really sort of large into all these larger things like oils. I was thinking about the oil. I mean, you didn't talk about, like, I was thinking about the oil spill in Huntington Beach, and there's so much outside world and larger things like nationalism, but then you go really in, and so you do that sort of out and in and pan in and out, like really quickly, like sometimes paratactically, like one image after another, like right away. Like what is that like? Can you talk about that, or are you interested in talking about that?
Sure. No, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna hold on to that tweezer poet. Like, it's sort of like, watch out, I'll get you with my tweezer. Yeah, I mean, I think that writing about whatever. I don't write poem. When I'm writing a poem, I'm not like thinking about themes, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but like, I'm not like, I'm gonna write a poem about, nationalism. It's just like, oh, this is, at some point I'm like, oh, this is what I'm writing about. But I do think that, I have some tendencies to be abstract at times. And I think the tweezer scale, the micro or the detail becomes the thing that grounds a poem, the thing that like brings me, as like when I'm writing it, but also like potentially whoever is experiencing the poem, like to like human scale, to the body, to like actually how we perceive an experience. So for me, it's sort of like those tweezers, that hair or whatever. We can't really, I don't know. I don't think that like poems, at least the ones that I write, can hold like, huge concepts without being grounded in something physical. I'm actually thinking now about the eyelash in the June Jordan poem, study number 1, I think. Anyway, it's a poem that like June Jordan like is sort of listing these like, larger scale economic, social, racial violences, and then there's this eyelash, on her lover's upper lip that like sort of like somehow brilliantly, because she's brilliant, like manages to like balance or counterbalance those huge forces that we, are told are like bigger than anything we could be or do. And I love that she's just like, no, and I'm going to show you how. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's something I hope to be able to do, in my work. So yeah, thank you for the question.
I love when your poems tracked. Yeah, let's do it.
Oh,
my internet's kind of spotty. So,
yeah.
Oh no, I was gonna say I love how your poems get abstract. I love when they have that sort of thinking mind and philosophical mind, and then they move to the garbage froth, but yeah, I love it. So
thank you. I was just saying, we were saying that like we have garbage in common, because you were saying this is a garbage can, which is ridiculous, like not a garbage. I mean, a garbage can, because I mean, garbage tells us everything about ourselves.
It does. It really does. But yeah, let's take a couple questions in the Q&A. I think I answered the first one. Maybe I'll ask this. I'll read the second one from Laura Yu. I think your obit poems and Now Dear Memory speak to me with their in-betweenness, in between generations, raising my kids while caring for my mom, and in between cultures and languages. Can you talk a bit about this in-betweenness of the second generation immigrant identity? Absolutely. I never know. I think I'm a first generation, but I never know if I'm first or second, actually. But my parents were born not here, and I was born here. So if that makes me second, then I must be second. But I never quite figured that one out. But yeah, I think that, yeah, same, right? I think there's so much in between this, and I used to be really sort of destabilized by that in-betweenness. And it wasn't until I got really old that I started embracing that liminal space that I think I just exist in. But it does sometimes feel like, like people as a cliche would say, you're neither here nor there, but I think that's true, but you're here, like you're in a new space that you have to create, and that has all these interesting collisions of different things. So there's so much in betweenness in everything that's related to being born in a country where your parents weren't born. I think language is the first place that happens, which is also what Ari, I mean, it's like both of us grew up with different languages in our households, and yet you were saying about your language abilities being not great, and mine are not great, but I tried. But it's and so like what always makes me think about, even at the language level, it's like, do you like they're just words. Sometimes I think in Chinese because they're just words that just describe something so well. Like there's tao yan means like really annoying. And there's just no way to say that but really annoying. But tao yan just gets it at a whole nother level of like really irritating. And I'm sure there are words in your language too that you just can't find the English for. So I think for me, it's that in-betweenness of language is where I think I feel it the most. How about you, Ari?
About in-betweenness?
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like that's just everything.
Yeah, right?
I'm like,
The body, right? Like everything, right? I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
Everything. I mean, I feel like in-betweenness is also like it's kind of, I don't know, is it it could be a refusal of like the binary, like it's
exactly
like both and neither, and like actually like I'm not gonna situate myself like only in one or only the other.
Exactly. Yeah.
And maybe there's not only two anyway, like
right. Yeah, I think we do contain our multitudes, right? I mean, I hate quoting that, but it's true. But yeah, let me take Ekta's question. Let me see. I wonder if both of you can talk about your editing process, as the content is ancestral and holds its own language and importance. Was it tough to revise poems for your books? Also, hi, Ari. Ekta's the best.
Go ahead if you want.
No, you go ahead. You could start.
Okay.
I haven't thought about it yet.
Okay. Gosh, yeah, my editing process. It's really, I mean, it's really different for every poem, like some poems come out and they're like almost whole. That's like, the when the magic happens, right? But and I just have to kind of get out of the way. But some of the poems in the book really took years. And I was saying this recently. I did a class visit, and I was saying this. A student asked a similar question, like, I would have kept working on it, but I had to turn the manuscript in. So it was kind of like, I guess this poem is done. But some of them, my editing process is, a lot of it is me talking back to the work, asking questions of the work, like asking questions of like, of a line, of a word choice, of something that's not working, writing and rewriting, cutting. I mean, some poems need to get bigger and some poems need to get much, much smaller. But yeah, it's not, I don't have like one way that I edit. I think different poems kind of ask for different approaches. So yeah, what about you, Victoria?
And your lines are so, I mean, I was telling you this earlier, that there's a review here or a blurb that says every line holds. Reading this book is like feeling gravity. I just love that, because that's how I felt when reading your poems too. You're such a stylist at the line level, and the the sentence in some of these poems are a unit, and then in others it's the line. I just think you just, it seems like, and I asked you this earlier, and we're just talking on the phone, is that you're it seems like your lines would come really naturally, you know, but yeah, I like that every poem demands or asks of us something different. I think that's true for me too. And I just, if I've completed some kind of draft, no matter how many poems or how bad they are, I'll just start reading them over and over again and editing them. And it's like, one day I might just love something. Well, that's actually very rare. One day I might think something is okay. And then the very next day I've pretty much chopped off the majority of the poem and rewritten the bottom half, you know, so it really varies. But I also have a pair of tweezers. And so I like to tweeze around the language too. And I just think it's so fun to play with words. And so and the stranger the better, you know. I think that it's fun to you know, you just put weird words together and collide them in different ways. And so that to me is when it gets really fun, is when I actually get to go into things that I've written and really revise them and edit them, which I think is part of the writing process. And then maybe I'll take one more question because it's 6:56 and we're going to end soon. But Alex T, I think, asked this great question. I absolutely love that line in Oracle where you write, quote, "Today for 1 second, a woman is anyone who has a body and can't forget it," unquote. I wonder if you could say a bit more about this and how you think about poetic language and form in relation to gender, sexuality, queerness, or the body.
Thanks for reading that out loud too, Victoria. Thank you, Alex, for that question. That's such a big question. Yeah, I will try to say something about that. I think our language to talk about gender is so frustratingly inadequate, and yet it's the language that we have. And so, you know, that line is sort of like, okay, I guess I can say this thing that it, you know, is not true. It's not true in the world, right? It's not true in the world, but it felt true when I was writing it. And as, you know, as writers, as artists, I feel like we get to make little realities, you know, with words. And so I think that is part of what I want to do and try to do when I'm thinking about gender and sexuality, and kind of pushing the language, pushing the container, trying to stretch it or trying to make it trying to make the container uncomfortable with itself, if that makes sense. Trying to like strain it a bit and see what happens. And like, does it break? Can it hold this idea? Does the idea make sense? Or not sense, like not in a rational way. Does the idea make like intuitive sense, emotional sense? And so then if we have that, then what else then can we make? Or how else can we then push the language further? That's what I got for you, but I'm gonna think about that. Thank you.
I like it. I like what you got. But it's 6:58, so I think Eric is gonna come back now. Yeah.
Hey, thank you for sharing your work with us, both of you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in tonight. We do have signed copies of Dear Memories, so please everyone come get yours while they last in store or at greenapplebooks.com. And please also buy Ari's book, A Symmetry. And everyone have a wonderful night.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Hi, Monica. Hi, Brian. Hi, Somas. Everyone, thanks.
Thank you. I'll be back in the Bay at some point. If folks there want their book signed, I would love to do that. And I can come by the store as well and sign copies.
Awesome. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks, Erica. It was fun to hang out with you, Ari.
So fun to hang out with you too. And thank you so much, Erica.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Have a good night.